The United States has already begun creating the conditions for mine-clearing operations in the Strait of Hormuz. And Iran is responding with a sharp warning. If pressure builds there, ports across the Gulf may no longer be able to be used. Because if the pressure builds there, ports across the Gulf will not be safe. And at the same time, this war has not disappeared. It has simply changed its shape. This is no longer just a question of one strait. It's a question of Iran's entire breathing system. So, if Hormuz is the car that everyone sees, what is the route that Iran still hopes that no one will cut? I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your ground report, where we cut through all the noise and stay with what's real. So today, we're not stopping at the headlines. We begin with what is happening right now in the Gulf, and then we move the camera north to a place that gets less attention but maybe just as important. The Strait of Hormuz is not the whole story, because if you want to understand how real pressure is placed on Iran, you also have to understand the Caspian Sea. Not an open sea, not an ocean, a giant enclosed lake with only 5 neighboring states. And right there, in that space, sits one of the most interesting trade and connection routes between Iran, Russia, and whoever is still trying to help Tehran breathe while the Gulf is under pressure. Let's simplify the map without oversimplifying this story. Hormuz is a global choke point. Whoever sits on that strait touches energy, marine insurance, oil prices, and the nerves of the entire world. So when the Americans say that they're preparing mine-clearing operations, setting up a safer shipping route, and moving destroyers into position, this is not just a tactical move. It's a statement. Iran will not keep selling fear at sea and charging the world a price for basic passage. But this is where we need to stop and think, because if all the focus stays on Hormuz, it is easy to miss something bigger. Iran did not build itself around just one exit. Yes, Hormuz is critical for the Iranian oil and the trade through the Gulf. But when the South comes under pressure, the regime looks north for backup. And that is where the Caspian Sea enters the story. Not as a full substitute, not as a magic solution, but as a secondary artery. An artery that connects Iranian ports to Russian ports, to rail lines, to river systems, to cargo routes, and to a logistical corridor that can move goods, grain, and according to various reports, potentially more sensitive equipment as well. And here's the first thing that you need to understand about the Caspian Sea. It is surrounded by only 5 countries: Russia, Iran, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, and Turkmenistan. It has no direct access to the ocean. There is no free naval movement there like in normal international sea lanes. It has a unique legal status shaped by arguments, agreements between those 5 states. And that matters because it means that the question, why not just shut down the Caspian too, is not a simple question at all. Hormuz is an international maritime choke point with global significance. The Caspian is a far more enclosed and controlled space with sovereignty, legal arrangements, and a very different level of sensitivity. So, what is actually happening there? According to reports from recent weeks, alongside the growing pressure around Hormuz, Russia had resumed grain exports to Iran through the Caspian Sea. That may sound less dramatic than missiles, but that's exactly the point. Big wars are not sustained only with firepower. They are sustained with wheat, with ports, with insurance, with small cargo vessels, and with the ability of a regime to keep receiving goods when its main front is being squeezed. Reports on this route reduce the ships that are leaving Astrakhan and other Volga-connected corridors, carrying cargo towards Iran, and a growing understanding that the Caspian Sea is becoming a safer trade route for Iran whenever Hormuz becomes unstable. And that brings us back to Russia, because the link between Moscow and Tehran is no longer just a convenient partnership. In recent years, it has become a relationship of mutual need. Iran helped Russia, Russia helped Iran. Earlier reports suggested that ammunition and weapons moved from Iran to Russia through the Caspian Sea, and now newer reports claim that Israel has struck a Russian-Iranian smuggling route inside the Caspian region, including infrastructure linked to Bandar Anazali. So if those reports are accurate, their significance is much wider than one strike. It would mean that Israel is not looking only at the launcher, it is looking at the artery. Not only at what Iran fires towards Israel, but at what keeps Iran connected to its supply network. And this fits the broader pattern that you are already seeing in this war. In Hormuz, the Americans are trying to break Iran's model of maritime extortion, the model in which Tehran threatens, disrupts, raises costs, and injects fear into the global system. In the north, if the Russian-Iranian route in the Caspian has also become a target, then the picture is even larger. Pressure from the south on Iran's outward access, and pressure from the north on its backup corridors. This is no longer just a war over oil, it is a war over breath. Now, let's be precise and not exaggerate. The Caspian cannot replace Hormuz one-to-one. Not in volume, not in speed, not in access to global markets. Shipping capacity there is smaller, the vessels are smaller, and even falling water levels in some areas limit what can be done. So anyone presenting the Caspian as a full solution to Iran is not describing the reality. But anyone ignoring it completely is also missing the reality, because under pressure, regime does not look for perfect. They look for enough to buy time, enough to keep a supply chain alive, enough to avoid immediate collapse. And this is exactly where we can also stop and talk about China. A lot of people ask, does China receive trade through this route as well? Is China connected to this corridor? Here, we have to be careful. There is regional trade, there are logistical corridors, and there are much broader Chinese interests that are tied to the energy and the commerce with both Iran and Russia. But at this point, it would be too simplistic to say that the Caspian Sea is China's route. What is fair to say is this: China depends on stable energy flows from the Gulf. So any real pressure on Hormuz affects Beijing. And at the same time, any alternative route that helps Iran and Russia keep goods moving and going on reduces even slightly the power and the pressure. So China does not need to appear physically in the Caspian Sea to remain part of its strategic equation. Now let's return to the big question. If Hormuz is so important, then why say that the story is not really about Hormuz? Because Hormuz is the visible symptom. It is the bottom that everybody sees, the headlines, but the real system is more complicated. Hormuz is about Iran's outward access to the world. The Caspian is about what helps Iran stay connected inward and northward. So if you pressure only the exit, you create pain. If you pressure the backup networks as well, you begin to challenge the endurance. And that's something very different. At this point, Russia adds another layer of complexity, because unlike Hormuz, where the United States can project naval power openly, the Caspian sits right next to Russia. And that changes everything. It means that every move there, every strike, every signal has to be measured differently. Not because Russia is untouchable, not because nothing there can be hit, but because this is a much more sensitive arena when it comes to great power escalation. So if Israel did act there and did so without sliding into a direct confrontation with Moscow, that likely means that the move was highly calculated, highly limited, and focused on message and also on corridor. not an opening of a full front against Russia. And that leads to another mistake that we have to avoid. Not everything that can be done should be done. Not every corridor can be closed like a steel door. Sometimes the goal is not to seal it completely. Sometimes the goal is to make it more dangerous, more expensive, slower, and more exposed. And that is true in Hormuz, and it may also be true in the Caspian Sea. If you cannot erase a route, you can still make it less reliable, less consistent, less secure. And in an economic strategic war, that alone can be enough to change the calculations of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Did you know that you can invest in one of the world's most innovative economies, the nation of Israel, just as easily as you invest in American markets? That's why today, I'm excited to introduce you to our good friends and sponsors at Wise Money Israel, who we know and trust for years. Their CEO and his family are longtime friends of Mati Shoshani, and I trust them completely. So whether you're looking to elevate your 2026 investment strategy, diversify internationally, or support Israel and its economy, Wise Money Israel offers professional guidance to help you participate in one of the world's most dynamic markets. SEC-registered Wise Money Israel manages Israeli stock and bond accounts for investors from over 30 nations who want to capitalize on Israel's position as a global innovation powerhouse. The Israel-based professionals provide expert access to companies in Israel's traditional and high-growth sectors. As of today, Wise Money Israel manages about $100 million in client assets with integrity and biblical focus. If you are looking to fulfill your biblical mandate by supporting Israel, we highly recommend that you reach out to this team. Click the link below in the description or visit wisemoneyisrael.com/TBN. Again, that's wisemoneyisrael.com/TBN for a free consultation today. And here, we also need to talk about what's happening inside Iran itself. The more pressure builds, the more the regime begins to look like a system managing survival, not confidence. The Strait reports about delays in Khamenei's burial, the sense of a battered leadership structure, and the attempt to project strength outward while signs of fear accumulate inside. All of that paints the picture of a regime that is afraid not only of bombs, but of the moment that it begins to look too weak in the eyes of its own public. And when a regime like that understands Hormuz may not be enough, it will search more aggressively for backup routes. In simple words, the Strait of Hormuz is the place where Iran threatens the entire world. The Caspian Sea is the place where Iran tries to make sure that the world cannot fully choke it. Hormuz is the face of the crisis. The Caspian is the back room of the warehouse. Hormuz is leverage. The Caspian is endurance. And once you understand both together, you understand why the real story is larger than one strait. So if you understand this war, beyond just one headline, beyond one image, beyond one more escalation, in a studio, this is exactly where you should stay with us. Give this video a like, subscribe, share, send it to somebody who wants to understand what's happening here in the Middle East, because we're not only telling you what exploded, we're trying to show you what keeps the system alive, who's feeding the oxygen, and where the real pressure point may be. So, what are we seeing tonight? The United States is beginning to establish freedom of action in Hormuz. Iran is threatening to widen the coast, and the focus now has moved north to the Caspian Sea, to the Russian-Iranian connection, and to the question of whether that route remains Tehran's fallback artery or whether it too is beginning to come under pressure. Because in the end, wars like this are not decided only where the cameras are. They're also decided in the places that get less attention, fewer headlines, but carry enormous weight. And the question from this point forward is not only whether Hormuz stays open, but how much oxygen Iran still has left from the north. And now, just before we close, let's pray together, because this is a very, very complicated situation. And what I learned in this war is that the best way to tackle all the challenges is to unite in prayer and ask God to give us the wisdom that is needed. First of all, this is a war over the truth, over what's happening in this region. And more than that, this is a spiritual war between good and evil. So let's pray, first of all, for wisdom to our leaders, for our soldiers fighting in this war, for everybody who's affected by this conflict. Let's pray for them to have God's peace in their hearts and make the right decisions. And above all, let's unite in prayer for the peace of Jerusalem and for the Iranian people.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.